BS-Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord.
Any superstitions going into the game? Any special thing you carried into the game on Sunday that you had tucked away somewhere?
I did. I always, I've learned a lot from my wife over the years. She's so about the power of intention, and believing things that are really going to happen. And she always makes a little altar for me at the game because she just wills it so much. And so she put together a little altar for me that I could bring with pictures of my kids. And I have these little special stones and healing stones and protection stones. And she has me wear a necklace and take these drops she makes. And I say all these mantras. And I stopped questioning her a long time ago. I did. I just shut up and listened.
Welcome to BS-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the usual, bullshit. I'm your host, Trey Dorn, and what you just heard was a clip from a 2019 interview with Tom Brady, where he's talking about all of the fun crystal rituals his wife, Giselle, makes him do regarding his football career. Because that's right, we're finally doing the crystal episode, guys. We're finally doing an episode on crystals. It had to happen sometime, right? Like, it's a witchcraft podcast. Crystals are a massive thing in the modern witchcraft movement. Well, at least in the last half dozen years. And, it's always been a thing, but I feel like it's become more of a thing at least within the last decade than it used to be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just more of a matter of fact. Or at least the crystal component has gone much more mainstream from the modern witchcraft movement than it used to be. And we're going to talk about it, I guess. Look, I'm going to be blunt with you guys. This might not be the episode about crystals you expected. I mean, if you know me well enough, this might be the episode you 100% expected from me, but yeah. This is going to be a thing, cuz we're not going to be talking about like fun uses for crystals. We're not going to be talking about various correspondences. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about about how crystal magic kind of made its way into the modern witchcraft movement. And then we're going to talk about the bad stuff. I'm just going to say ahead of time, there is a massive content warning on this episode. And it's bad. It's bad. It's not necessarily bad. I mean, the good news, bad news, spoiler, too long, don't want to listen, is that doesn't have to be bad. But in many ways, it currently is. So, yeah. Let's talk about crystal magic. Now, crystal magic has origins all over the place. It's using stones of various kinds in magical capabilities. Crystals especially comes from a number of places. The Sumerians have one of the earliest historically documented use of crystals in around 4500 to 2000 BCE. It's also Plato, in his account of Atlantis, mentions crystal healing. We also find crystal healing tied in through, besides like Sumeria, which is in Mesopotamia, and in Greece. We see it in ancient Egypt, which is also in that region, and we see it in ancient Rome. We also see it in places like India, and then we also see it in like we see it in Native American groups like the Hopi in Arizona. Like, And the ancient Greeks, like, they use crystals a lot. It's the word crystal itself is derived from the Greek word kristallos, which translates to ice. The Greeks believed that things like clear quartz were water that had frozen to the point where it would remain in that way forever. Like an amethyst, literally in ancient Greek, means to like not get drunk, and it was worn as a hangover aid, according to some sources. So like the use of crystals in healing has like a lot of different places. But you mostly see this in regions around the Mediterranean, along with India, and you also see it in, obviously, the Americas. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that while that's really where crystal magic came from historically, in the modern witchcraft movement, we see crystals being used by a lot more people than that. Like, you'll notice not on that list was Norse, like the Germanic tribes, and people like, yet I know many a Norse heathen who will use a ton of crystals in their witchcraft if they do witchcraft. It's really common. And you might be asking yourself, how the heck did it go from being this like obviously like a Hellenic pagan using crystals makes perfect sense in line with their, their history. It's like another groups, but why would heathens do it? Why do we see this in such a universal thing across the modern witchcraft movement, regardless of the origins of our witchcraft? Like, if someone's, why do I even see people who claim to be reconstructionists of traditions that would never have used crystals suddenly have like a whole bunch of shiny rocks? Well, a couple of answers to that question. The first answer is that shiny rocks look cool, and we all like shiny rocks. That is an undeniable, indisputable truth about a lot of the listeners of this show, myself included. I'm not gonna lie. That is also true about me. But the other main reason is a little something we don't always like to talk about, and that's the New Age movement. The New Age movement. The New Age movement really started in the 1970s, and it came out of the same elements that led to the popularity of the modern witchcraft movement. While I argue that the modern witchcraft movement is separate from the New Age movement, the fact is they came up at the same time amongst the same people, and there's a lot of crossover. The fact is we all know New Agey witches. We have all met plenty of New Agey witches. We have all been driven nuts by New Agey witches. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but the New Age movement tends to be pretty problematic. There's a lot of cultural appropriation from groups and filing the numbers off and misinformation and just terrible stuff. Like I mentioned briefly earlier that India was one of the places that crystal and ceremony and things like that got used, and crystal healing and things like that. Like in the Vedic texts, in the Garuda Purana and the Graha Gokara, there is like a bunch of information on the importance of crystals in Indian culture. And, I could read you a Wikipedia article, but, I'll let you look that up. It's there. And here's the thing about the New Age movement. That's one of their favorite places to just take shit and file the numbers off of and mistranslate and misappropriate and just absolutely just fully take from. Same when it comes to Native Americans. Taking stuff from Native American tribes is a favorite thing for middle-class white New Agers to do. And, because those very things that the U.S. government punished people for practicing, if you're actually a member of those tribes, it's very trendy for then a white person from the suburbs to go do themselves. That's just depressing. But yeah, a lot of the crystal usage and a lot of the popularity of crystals comes from blatant cultural appropriation by the New Age movement. Now, that's not to say that your use of crystals is culturally appropriative. I am not saying that at all. Everyone, rocks are rocks. You're allowed to use rocks. Both shiny and not shiny. The important thing, though, is that when a person uses crystals in their witchcraft, it's more so looking at am I doing something that is culturally appropriative with it? Right? Like, am I using this in a way that, would not be open to me otherwise? Think of it this way. It's not that you have the stone, it's what you do with the stone in this case. And it's, if you're looking at like spellcraft, if you're looking at rituals that involve a crystal and you're doing that, you need to evaluate this like any other witchcraft source. You need to say, who is this author? First off, where did they get this information? Is this something that they invented? Is this something that they got from somewhere? If it's something that they got from somewhere, did they cite it? What is the path of the origin of this ceremony thing, etc.? And so, because again, there are plenty of open cultures. Obviously, it's crystals in use for this stuff. Like, Hellenic paganism is open to people, so you can still do things in a perfectly respectful way that's not culturally appropriative. You just have to understand the origins of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the problem is that a lot of New Age literature has gone out and completely obscured this. So it is something that it is a challenge, and it makes it harder for us, but I think it's important that you put in the work. Obviously, if it's like a spell that you've created yourself and something that you've invented from whole cloth, you're probably fine. But if you're using something from a source, you should need to really look at the origins of that source and whether or not it's an okay thing to do. I don't want to make you feel bad. I just think it's important that we evaluate and look at what we're doing with the things that we have. Now, that's what you do with the crystals you already own. So one of the biggest challenges with the popularity of crystals exploding is that obviously supply rose to meet demand. And when supply rose to meet demand, it didn't necessarily do it in the most ethical way. There's a real human cost to a lot of the crystal market. And I definitely think we need to talk about that, because crystal mining is a very bad place in a lot of the world. And this is where our content warning kicks in. We're going to be talking about violence. There's going to be a mention of sexual assault. Not an in-depth one, just like a sentence. And there is going to be a mention of child labor. There are ethical crystal mines in this world. There are many. But the problem is you go into a crystal shop, a New Age shop, a witch shop, and there are just crystals for sale, and there's not an ounce of information about where they come from. And I think it's very important that you ask a shop owner, if you're going to buy a crystal for them, where they sourced these crystals. Now, they might not be able to tell you. They might tell you a wholesaler. And then we're stuck researching the wholesalers. But this is my request to people who sell crystals. Know where your crystals come from. Know where they were mined. If you can't find that information, it's probably not from somewhere good. A lot of crystals are exported from countries without the best labor laws. Let's take, for example, Madagascar. Madagascar exports a lot of crystals. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, but not a lot of mining companies operate there, though. Most of the crystals from Madagascar are mined by hand, so-called artisanal mines. Njoma Ramartina is a collection of villages that sits near one of Madagascar's largest deposits of rose quartz. In 2019, Tess McClure of The Guardian went there and wrote an article about it. In this article, McClure wrote, "It is a day's drive from the capital city of Antananarivo. The further you travel from the capital, the greater the security risks. Large swaths of territory are described as red zones, considered unpoliceable by state forces. Rural villages often face raids from armed gangs known as Dahalo, who steal cattle, sometimes killing, robbing, or raping villagers. In January, the week we traveled in Njoma Ramartina, 3 men armed with machetes were killed in a clash with village police. Do not travel or go out at night, people warned. Drive in convoy. Stay off the roads after 5 p.m. Most homes in Njoma Ramartina have no electricity, no running water, no phone or network connections. Malnutrition is common. According to the World Bank, about 80% of those outside Madagascar cities live below the $1.90 a day poverty line. Health researchers found around half of parents in Njoma Ramartina had lost at least one infant child to illness or hunger. As we made our way out there, the driver noted that the road had recently been sealed, a vast difference from the deeply potholed gravel near town. This is one of the best roads I've seen here," he laughed. "Here in Madagascar, the road only gets made when there is something they want to get out." In a cool, dark room in the town council hall, Mani Jean Rahandrinamaro, the deputy mayor of Njoma Ramartina, sunk into a black vinyl couch. "Crystal, amethyst, rose quartz," he said. "Everything except sapphires and rubies we mine here." He placed a few stones on the wooden table in front of him, polished clear quartz and purple amethyst. He estimated that from a population of about 10,000 people, up to a quarter of locals now depended on the mines for some income. Between 2 and 4 men died each year in the crystal pits surrounding the village, he said. Only 2 last year, but often it was 3 or 4. I will link this article in the show notes, and I recommend that you read it. Because the Madagascar mines are especially dangerous. Besides landslides, people working the mines are at a much higher increased rate of lung cancer due to inhalation from fragments of quartz from mining. And it gets worse. The U.S. Department of Labor and the International Labor Organization estimate that in the Madagascar mines, there are about 85,000 children working. 85,000 children. And it's just, I think it's important that people remember this. Like, because as we're like going about our day, like we go and we scroll across social media and we see people pulling out crystals and talk about like, you know, the crystal haul this week on TikTok. And it's just, how many of these people know where the crystals they bought came from? How many people know that there's this cost to what they're doing? How many people realize how many people realize that they may not have something that was ethically sourced? Now, I don't want you to feel bad for a crystal that you already own. That's something you own. It's not doing any additional harm sitting on your shelf. I don't want you to feel guilty about it. This episode is not meant to make you feel bad about what you like about things you already own. Like, if you don't know where that crystal was sourced, there is a chance it was sourced from somewhere ethically. However, I know that a lot of you listening to this show are probably going to buy another crystal. Right? Because, again, we all like shiny rocks. They're neat. But what I'm asking you to consider is the next time you go out and you buy yourself a piece of quartz or whatever it is you're looking for, is ask yourself, where did this stone come from? Where did this crystal come from? Because if you look at that low price tag, understand that sometimes there was a real human cost that came with it. I've been putting off this episode. I didn't want to make this episode, but I needed to make this episode. And again, I want to remind you, there are ethically sourced crystal mines out there. There are places with good working conditions. There are places that are where workers are. I mean, mining is always risky no matter what, but there are places that like have safety standards and are ethically sourced and people are paid well. Like this is all, it is possible to buy a crystal ethically. You can get that shiny rock and not feel bad about it. Don't worry, that exists. But what's important is that, like, so this is my challenge to shop owners. Where are you getting your supplies? Who are you sourcing it from? And yes, does it mean that you might have to charge more for crystals to get them from an ethically sourced vendor? Yeah. But you still need to, like, we need to make that effort and put that in. I don't know. I don't like doing harm, but I'm a Wiccan. What do I know? It's so important. I don't think that most people think about this. And we have to remember that crystals, things like this, these are completely optional parts of our lives. Like, I understand that functioning under capitalism sucks, and that sometimes we have to buy the food from places, like our food from places that don't necessarily like have the best working conditions for the people, because that's the food that we can afford and we need to eat. Like, that makes sense. But these are not items that we need. So I'm saying, if you're going to buy an item that you don't need, a luxury item, please put in the work to make sure that it comes from somewhere safe, because there are, again, plenty of ethical crystal mines out there in this world. Make sure that what you buy is sourced from one of them, and if you can't find out where something is sourced from, odds are they're hiding that information for a reason. But that's just me. That's just my opinion. Oh boy. So, sorry if that got a little depressing here. You know, it kind of had to happen. Now I have to find a way to go into the outro, and that's just hard. That's gonna wrap up this episode for this month. I guess now I'm gonna plug my TikTok. Remember that this show is brought to you by the wonderful support of my Patreon patrons. If you want to support this show, go to patreon.com/TRAEGORN. And supporting this show for even $1 a month will get you access to these episodes a whole week earlier. You could have been depressed a whole week earlier than this. I want to give a shout out to people at the shout out level of Stephanie Graves, Mary Stoll, Lindsay Dosey, Bruce Norville, Courtney, Amber Schmidt, Isabella Guerra, an Echo of Truth, and Kaichi. And remember, if you can't support the show financially, I understand. Just please share this show with everybody you can. Tell your friends. Tell your friends. Tell your friend's mom. Tell your friend's dogs. Just everybody on the street. Tell your enemies. Just they don't have to like you to listen to me. Remember, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter at TRAEGORN. I'm on Tumblr at TRAEGORN.tumblr.com. And I am on TikTok at TikTok. My TikTok username is TRAEGORN. If you want to follow the show on Facebook, you can follow it at facebook.com/BS-Free Witchcraft. Please use that official page. Don't try to find me on Facebook. It's really weird when people do that. And pretty much you can assume that if I'm saying this in an episode, it means someone tried to do it recently. And don't. That's where I talk to my mom. But I love you guys. You're my magicians. And remember that this is a part of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Remember, if you want probably a more fun episode about witchcraft to listen to, check out Hex Positive. Bree took a little bit of a hiatus where she was putting up content featuring other people for a couple of months, but she's back. And the Witch Ways mid-month episodes are resuming as well. And Bree's a secular witch, and so really fun show, and you should listen to Hex Positive because it's neat, and you can find information on how to follow that show at nerdandtie.com/hex. Remember, you can always find subscription links and everything for the show at bsfreewitchcraft.com or at nerdandtie.com/bsfreewitchcraft. And I don't know. I'm exhausted, but we're going to move forward because we're brave. Because we're not going to be chickens. We're going to be magicians. Hell yeah. I don't know. That was a weird way to end the show. It's a weird episode, guys. I'm fine.